call the Ordinance Committee to order today. Lori, want to call roll for us?
Chair Grant House.
Here.
Member Rouse.
Here.
Member Hotchkiss.
Here.
And we have one item on our agenda today, which is airport ordinance update and security program resolution.
And Jeff McKee, the airport maintenance superintendent, will be presenting today.
Great. Hi, Mr. McKee.
Hi. I'm going to talk about a proposed airport ordinance update, excuse me, and a security program resolution pertaining to the airport operations. Outline of my discussion, I'm going to talk a little bit about the scope, talk a little bit about background, and then the proposed changes to the Title 18 and the resolution itself, and ask for your recommendation. Background, municipal code embodies the laws of the city of Santa Barbara. Laws are adopted by city council and then codified in the municipal code. Laws pertaining to the airport are located in Title 18 of the municipal code, and that's the title, the ordinance that we're proposing to revise. The last major revision to that title occurred in October 2001, and rules and regulations administered by the airport are typically adopted by council, and the resolution is included in this package also. The purpose of the ordinance revision, kind of following the tragedy of September 11th, the establishment of TSA, more robust security requirements to the airport. We're looking to update the Title 18 ordinance to reflect those changes. This proposal also creates a framework for future ground transportation program at the airport, eliminates unenforceable sections in the current code, and updates sections where courts have clarified the law on advertising, camping, and soliciting. And then it clarifies many other sections. I do want to say that we're just kind of hitting the high points of the changes here in this presentation. There are many changes throughout, so we tried to pick the substantial changes in this presentation. The purpose of the proposed resolution establishes rules and regulations for people that are allowed into the restricted area, are badged people, and also establishes an appeal process for violations. The development process for this package, staff worked with city attorney and others to develop the package. It's been to both Airport Commission Ordinance Committee and Airport Commission, who reviewed and recommended approval to you. From here, you're seeking your approval. We'll be going to City Council for introduction and adoption. And I think from there, I'll just jump right into the changes that we're looking at. Title 18, Chapter 4 definitions. We reformatted this section, and we defined the following terms that I have listed there. I won't go through those, but we defined those terms. On to Chapter 8, General Regulations. The section on solicitation, 1808-020. We're proposing new language consistent with recent court decisions. Describes where in the terminal area what is permissible as far as solicitation and what is not, and it defines some terms there. Advertising, clarify 1808-040, clarifies the process for displaying advertising on the airport. Sign permit is required on the air side, or on the land side, excuse me. On the air side facing the airfield, it's subject to the airport director's approval. Those are signs that only can be seen by people using the airfield. 1806-065, the Commercial Ground Transportation Program, where the new section creates a structure for establishing an airport ground transportation, sets up a process for a framework for rules and regulations, allows permits and fees, and also establishes an appeals process within that ground transportation program. What's not on the slide, it also gives the authority, council gives the authority to Airport Commission to kind of oversee the program after it's originally adopted. That section also provides flexibility for council to regulate the following commercial activities as far as commercial ground transportation, taxi cabs, limousines, buses, courtesy shuttles, and couriers. 1808-150 area uses, we eliminated language that prohibited demonstrations, and we clarified the language on unlawful camping to reflect current judicial decisions. And it defines, it not only includes camping, but it talks about sleeping also in that section. 1808-200, noise abatement, titled.
Let me ask a quick question if I could.
Mr. Hotchkiss.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. If somebody comes in, misses a flight, and they arrive at 11 o'clock, and they got something that's going out at 5:30 the next morning, can they take a nap overnight in the airport?
Mr. Lincoln?
Yes, Councilman Hotchkiss, they are allowed to remain overnight in the terminal building, and if they doze off, that's okay.
Great, thanks.
Not that anybody wants to do that.
No.
We've all had that sad opportunity from time to time. All right.
We eliminated most of Chapter 1808-200, noise abatement. Those sections were unenforceable, and basically most of them were under FAA jurisdiction, so they weren't enforceable by the city. We did relocate 2 sections in that former chapter to Chapter 16. Those were turbojet and turboprop touch-and-go landings and helicopter training activities. The rest of this section we're proposing to delete, or chapter. 1808-200, controlled movement area. That's runways and taxiways. We're proposing new requirements for activities within that area, requiring communication equipment or an escort, communication with the tower, and then it also addresses the proper process for after-hours access to the control movement area. 1808-070, which was titled Access to Restricted Areas, and 1808-075, which was titled Security Identification, have been relocated and expanded to the new Chapter 10, which is titled Security. Moving on to Chapter 10, Security. The purpose of the creation, we're proposing a creation of a new Chapter 10 titled Security, establishes rules for the general public. That's kind of a point I want to make, that the ordinances apply directly to the entire general public, where the resolution just applies to the people that have been granted access to the restricted area. So that's kind of the difference between the two, why we did this in a resolution and an ordinance, not simply in the ordinance.
So if I may just for a second, so that's an important distinction from a legal perspective. Is there something we should know? Is there any discretion that we have here as a committee or the city council with regards to how that works?
Mr. Chair, I think basically the reason that we did it that way is folks that get a badge at the airport that are allowed into the restricted area agree to certain elements of our airport security plan. So those elements apply only to those folks. So it's not the things that are included in the resolution apply only to the people that are badge holders. Does that answer?
No, that helps. So they have agreements that they're making that are under the resolution, and then the requirements are from the federal government and other agencies probably as well. And then the local ordinances apply to the general public, and that's the ordinance side.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
So the security chapter establishes rules for the general public in the areas of restricted areas, personnel identification media, tampering with security devices, custody of keys, unattended baggage, and as I said, it works in conjunction with the proposed resolution. Chapter 12 is titled Pattern. We're proposing to delete the entire chapter, which talked about adherence to federal air traffic rules, traffic patterns, altitudes, and entry and exit of the pattern. Those are things that are governed by the FAA and not the city. Title 18, Chapter 16, Takeoffs and Landings. We're proposing to delete 1816-040, clearance of base leg and final approach leg. We clarified 1816-010, cockpit and engine checks, and 1816-020, competent operator must be at the controls. And then we relocated the sections that I mentioned earlier in this chapter also.
Now, again, just a quick question. So like on the 1816-040, the clearance of base legs and final approach legs, is that because that's standard operating procedure or something, and it doesn't need to be specified in our own local regulations?
We don't have purview over
I'm sorry, we do not have purview over that. We don't have the legal ability to enforce it.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so it was put in there, but we found out over time that it's just not enforceable at the local level.
Correct.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Hotchkiss.
Does any of this affect pilot instruction? And we're talking about touch and goes and other stuff. Anything relevant to instruction that goes on at the airport?
The touch and go references are for turbojet aircraft only. So there's some discussion on helicopter training activities. Other than that, there's nothing that would impact standard flight instruction.
How would the helicopter training be affected?
It has to do with hovering over certain areas. And we've just designated areas where we would not want them operating in the real. One of the ways we can do some of that is because they're actually on the airport service.
So they can still instruct, but it just is certain areas are off limits.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Title 18, Chapter 18, Operation of Hang Gliders. That section changed just a little bit. We clarified the language and we moved the definition to the definition section of the title, Chapter 4. Title 18, Chapter 20, Parked Aircraft. We were trying to clarify here if there's an inoperable parked aircraft or parts thereof on the ramps, the airport director has authority to ask for those things to be moved. It can be moved. It needs to be moved within 7 days. In 1808-130, we clarified that if it's a wreck, damage, or disabled aircraft on the runway, the airport director can move those immediately in the interest of safety and to get the airport back open. Chapter 24, taxing, we deleted, or we're proposing to delete Section 18-24030 and 040, movement of helicopters and caution. Chapter 36 is titled Fees, Rates and Fees. We clarified the section that parking rates at the airport are established by resolution of the City Council. Landing fees and terminal use fees are established based on cost of operation. Chapter 40, Enforcement. We updated the 1840-030 carrying firearms section, and we consulted with the Chief of Police, and we're proposing to eliminate specific references to periodic firearms competency testing by the airport patrol supervisor and airport patrol officers. The requirement.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, we have a question from Mr. Rouse when you're done. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Talked about the parking fees being a discretion of city, or fee resolution in front of City Council. What about concessionaires within the airport? Are they also, are those rent agreements reviewable by City Council?
Chairman House.
Yes.
Commissioner Rouse. Those are negotiated agreements with the concessions.
So that's directly between the airport administration and the concessionaire. It's not something that comes to City Council.
The longer term agreements do come to City Council. The shorter terms are approved by Airport Commission. Is that correct?
Okay, thank you.
And as I recall, there were limits that famous $2 cup of coffee. We said they're supposed to be within 10% of street rates, right?
That's correct.
Thank you.
All right. Food and beverage concessions, yes. All right. Please continue.
This section on carrying firearms also clarifies the purpose and intent of airport patrol officers carrying firearms to both include self-defense and defense of others. Defense of others was not included in the section prior to this. Chapter 44, Airport Commission adds authority for Airport Commission to approve an airport director to execute short-term aeronautical permits. So moving on to the proposed resolution.
May I ask you to go back just for a second to the firearms one? Just a practical matter. Maybe somebody who deals with security or you would know the answer. I mean, having firearms anywhere near the airport seems like a possible hazard. I mean, somebody could overcome a security officer and take their firearm and have access to it. And I know that there's the idea that there would be some protection by having a firearm there for their use. But doesn't it introduce a danger that wouldn't be there if just firearms weren't even anywhere near the airport whatsoever? Or I'm just wondering how they do it in England, you know, in London or something. But really, I'm just really concerned about that because, you know, to be able to, you could overcome a security officer and take the firearm, and then, but if it weren't there, that wouldn't even be a possibility.
We have to have armed, badged, uniformed law enforcement officers at the airport. It's part of the requirement. So it's a requirement. It would either be our own staff or we'd have to have, you know, other staff come, PD or what have you. But we do have a law enforcement division that's been providing that function for a long time.
Yeah, and even, I mean, like right in the terminal, I mean, even in those areas too?
Yeah, especially in the terminal because part of the armed response is to the checkpoint, the passenger checkpoint.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right, thank you.
As I've said, this proposed resolution pertains only to holders of personal identification media and kind of complements the certifications that our badge holders make to require access to restricted areas and dovetails with the airport security program. It also establishes authority to adopt rules and regulations, establishes standards for airport restricted areas in regards to permission to enter a restricted area, escorts within a restricted area, and escorts within a security identification display area. The proposed resolution also, for personnel identification media, establishes conditions for use of personnel identification, requires compliance with the rules, how that media is supposed to be displayed, lending your identification media to another, and also requires presentation to a peace officer or another authorized person. Other requirements or other standards here are reporting suspected security vulnerabilities and violations, procedures for confiscation, suspension, and revocation of personal identification media. Basically, that's your appeals process, and establishes when things are either confiscated, suspended, or revoked. Depends on the level of the action by the badge holder, and then establishes appeal process to potentially get your badge back. Compliance establishes that persons issuing personal identification media must comply with this resolution, the municipal code, federal security directives, and that violators are subject to prosecution. So that concludes my kind of hitting the high points of what the changes that we're proposing, and I'm asking for your recommendation.
All right, very good. Thank you very much. Does the city attorney have any other information for us or anything to add? Ms. Connect?
Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, let's open the public hearing. First of all, I don't see anyone here to speak to this, but we'll open the public hearing. And seeing no one here to ask us questions or to comment, we'll close the public hearing and questions from the committee, please. Or comments? Yes, Mr. Hotchkiss?
I recommend that we pass both A and B.
Okay, Mr. Rouse?
I'll second that.
Okay, now just for discussion, the reason that we don't have, we have a motion and a second, we don't have any strikeouts in the resolution is this is brand new, right? It's just, we have never had this resolution or something like it before.
Mr. Chairman, that's correct.
Okay, very good. Okay, good. So it seems pretty good. The Airport Commission has had a chance to see these things, and they've passed it along to us.
That is correct.
All right, great. Okay, unless there's any other comment or questions, we'll take a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And so that's it, unanimous. Anything else for us today, Ms. Peterson? All right, thanks. We stand adjourned. Thank you.